Hi everybody, this is Chet Roberts. I'll be talking about differentiating instruction today for our TESP 302 class. I do apologize up front. I've never used Screenocast before, so I'm still kind of working out the kinks. This is my third attempt, so bear with me on that one as well. So first of all, what is differentiated instruction? So according to our book, and I don't want to read verbatim here, it's all on the slide, but it's a kind of instruction that differentiates the content itself, the way you process it, the requirements for it, and the way you assess it. That way it's more accessible to your students. For me personally, I kind of wrote my own layman description down there on the second part of the slide. It's a form of instruction that adapts the way you teach into a more immersive format for the student. It makes them interact with the product either through a visual, an audible, or any kind of sensory interaction that enables them to have a higher attention span, absorb more knowledge, and ultimately just learn over a longer course period of time. You know, as you guys teach, I know through my experiences I've learned that people learn in different ways. Me personally, I'm more of an interactive learner. If I sit in a lecture that lasts over an hour, I pretty much will guarantee you I will fall asleep. In fact, I'm probably sure I've done it. I'm sorry for any of the professors listening to this. But in the scenarios where we're moving around, we're talking, we're looking at certain imaging, or listening to certain functions, or maybe they're playing certain audio fields, I feel like I'm definitely learning more. I'm absorbing more, taking more notation, and overall just being able to recall the information, which is the ultimate goal here. So, ultimately, how does a teacher differentiate its instruction? And I was kind of searching the internet. I cheated a little bit, I'm not going to lie, because I wrote this massive paragraph to explain it. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way. And kind of way you have to differentiate a classroom, I wanted to differentiate this PowerPoint by getting an image. So if you kind of look here, first of all, it breaks it down into the teacher and to the student category. First of all, teachers, we have, just like you go to a grocery store, you buy a product, it has its own features and categories. Our educational plans have the exact same. We have our content, we have the way we deliver it, and ultimately the end product. So by changing any of the three, you can adapt it for the student. Now I come from the retail world, where we kind of work for the customer and then go backwards from there. Well, as a teacher, our customer is the student. So starting from the student, you have to talk about their readiness, their interest, and their learning profile. So I've already kind of touched base a little bit on it. Students learn in different ways. They have different things they're actually interested in. For instance, I have 3 children. My oldest absolutely loves arts and crafts. She loves to read. My second child is more of a mathematics student. He likes numbers. And then my third child is more of like the encyclopedia knowledge. He doesn't really retain the information of what he's learning. He just likes reciting what he learns. So 3 different approaches, yet can learn 3 of the same subjects. So using this kind of format and understanding the 6 core values that I show in this picture, you can differentiate your instruction. You don't have to change all 6 at all time. Simply by just saying, hey, instead of doing a lecture today, I'm going to do this. Or instead of talking about this one item over and over, let's talk about it in a different way. And then of course, if the students are more interested in this facet of history, when we're talking about that certain decade or time period, let's talk a little bit heavier on that, get them interested, get them pumped up, and then ultimately use that energy to carry them into areas maybe they're not more used to or more interested in, and kind of use that to your advantage. So what does it exactly look like in a classroom? Well, I've got a nice, wonderful set of text there that shows you, but ultimately it's how immersive can you make the experience. I use a video game as the example. Video games of yesteryear, you think of Mario, 2 buttons and an arrow key, you're moving around, it's the coolest thing ever. Now, we have narrative text, we have storylines, hidden areas, objectives. It's more immersive. It gives you a set of goals. And the classroom can be the same. And I just kind of gently listed a few items. Creating learning stations is a great one by breaking up the classroom into areas that gets the children to actually move around, interact with individuals, having them think together, think about what they're talking about, pairing together, having the conversation, building the social skills, and sharing their knowledge also helps. Literature circles is a great thing. I know my youngest son absolutely loves it, where everybody kind of sits down and they try to read a little bit together. Maybe in the larger groups, making it more interactive might be a challenge, but definitely, it's an item for the toolbox. A lot of people don't think about audiobooks. I know that, it's either, truck drivers or someone in their elder years, or those book nerds. My wife is definitely one of those individuals where audiobooks is that way. But think about it. If you're in a classroom and it's just the teacher and that's all the student interacts with for education on a purpose, it's no different than an animal at a zoo getting fed by the same person. Eventually, they're going to get bored with it. So an audiobook or a video is a way to kind of spice up that area. My personal favorite, to be honest, is the open-ended project. And this isn't just, hey, here's one project, run with it. Having multiple projects available that ultimately go to the end result, I think, is more appreciative. It gives them more power. Anytime you can give more power to the student to make the decision of how they want to learn, to them it makes it feel as if the learning was their idea. And when someone gets the notion that something is their idea, they'll be able to carry it further, learn from it more, and they put more energy and they're more invested in it. You see this throughout history. I could probably spend all 10 minutes just talking about that alone. But for me, open-ended projects is definitely the way you can go with it. But the most important part is you have to make sure you create an assessment on those. So it does take a little bit of discipline. Having students create a presentation can tie into that as well. I know some students struggle with getting in front of classes, getting in front of their peers and speaking on that. I mean, I'm talking to a computer screen right now, and it's still, nerve-wracking for some. So this does create social skills. It's something you use in the real world. So not only are you teaching them the information, you're now teaching them an additional skill set. Anytime you can teach them more than one thing is exactly what we should be doing as educators. I grew up on the notion that any day you don't learn something is a day wasted. So even though you're in a history class or a mathematics class or an English class, whatever it is, you can learn additional skills at the same time. And of course, the use of software has definitely penetrated the educational format going, and I'm eager to see how that goes forward. And I particularly didn't touch base on that up front because even though I do believe that is the future, there are other methods that can be utilized that ultimately are exactly the same as interactive software, just without the program. Because I know there are schools that don't have that form of technology, but we shouldn't be using that as an excuse for not using this form of instruction. So, how do teachers prepare their students in the classrooms for the instruction? So if you're upfront about differentiating your instruction, and this is to some a revolutionary idea, and to some an idea they're not going to do, you really need to have those on board that are be with it. And I kind of use the plan, do, check, adjust method here. I broke it down. So, please make sure you ensure you have all the materials and process. For this to work, you have to be prepared. One who fails to prepare is prepared to fail. You have to establish the expectation up front that this is the instruction. That participation is definitely a must. And if you don't record the results, then you're not doing yourself any good. A checks and balance on how you're handling. One way of doing it today may not be the way of doing it tomorrow. The students change every class. The educational lessons change. History changes. Whatever you're teaching ultimately does end up changing. Adjust the instruction accordingly. Don't hesitate to change. Don't have reactions to every little thing, but try to be proactive and don't shy away from innovation. If someone else has an idea that's potentially better, give it a try. And if you're recording the results, they should have a baseline compared to what you're doing, and openly have discussions about these. And then you can ultimately create a community based off of that. And like I said earlier, start from the student, work its way backwards. It's ultimately about them. You can create all the instructions in the world, but if your students aren't interested, or if it's not tailored for them, they're not going to participate. And like I said, I'm trying not to read verbatim here on some of these. There's one sentence in the entire slide I will read verbatim, and if it knocks off points, then that defeats the purpose of this class. So you should never, ever forget, we must guarantee that every student can have the opportunity to learn. I think that sentence is worth its weight in gold, and I think this form of instruction speaks to that. So let's reflect. There's some common classroom practices today. Instructions through lecturing. You see it a lot in colleges. High schools still have it. Students beginning the year based off their achievement scores. I actually haven't been in a class that's been like that. I see grade levels like that, but not individual students. And bonus points for class participation. I will admit that's probably the dumbest idea I've ever heard. If that was the case, I would ace every class, my opinion. But if there is a teacher out there, shame on you. So delivering instruction for lecturing, if I just talked like this for an entire 15 minutes, nobody would care. Break it up, use graphics, illustrations, exercises, get the students involved. If you're basing on what they did last year for this year, it's a good starting point, but you can't focus the whole year on that. Create a baseline, move on, and grow. If you're not growing, you're losing. Your students need to continue to grow. And bonus points. I said this up front. It's a terrible idea. It implies participation isn't required. And in differentiated learning, participation is not only required, it is a must. You cannot have this form of class without participation. So please remember that going forward. Well, that was my last slide. I do and must admit that differentiated learning, I think, is the future. It is something that both education and the workplace can definitely carry. There are teachers, amazingly, still to this day that do not utilize this. So I look forward in continuing to learn about the process, and I hope you learned a couple things. Thank you.